Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on our webinar today, Finding Your New Normal, Aligning Your Team to Execute Quickly. This is Jackie Hatcherbone from Strategy Solutions. I am the Director of Community and Nonprofit Services. I also have John Papalea, who is a Senior Consultant with Strategy Solutions, with us today. This is actually the final of our series, Thriving Beyond Crisis webinars, and there's a total of 4 of them. So just for participating today, you will have the recording and slides for today, as well as all of the presentations that were part of this series. You may have noted in the chat feature that we do have all participants muted. Again, as I mentioned, our hope is to record this, so we're trying to minimize sound to the extent possible as best we can, barring what John and I may encounter outside of our own houses during today's session. But again, if you've got a question or a comment for John or myself, please feel free to use the question and answer or chat feature, and we'll do our best to respond to those as time allows. If not, we both can stick around for a few additional minutes and answer any of those questions as they come up. So just a quick little introduction. So here are John and I. Since we can't be with you in person, you can at least see who is speaking with you today. So I have actually been with Strategy Solutions for almost 16 years now. My anniversary is coming up. And prior to that, I did some direct service work working with children and families who had autism or other mental health, behavioral health conditions. I've done program evaluation work. I've helped develop and shape different programs. I've got a lot of work with culture and team building. My background is actually psychology and social work. So I am happy to be here with you this morning. John, would you like to do a quick little introduction?
Thanks, Jackie, and pleasure to talk to all of you. I've been with Strategy Solutions for about 4 months. And I started a career in manufacturing with a background in labor studies and ended up in healthcare in 1990, where I had all sorts of great opportunities and served as the CEO of a community hospital for 14 years. And then actually had the opportunity to serve as the CEO of a for-profit rehabilitation hospital for 5 years. And I was able to find Debbie and Strategy Solutions and Jackie and the whole team. And it's been a real pleasure. And it's nice during these times to be able to do something, connect and speak with all of you and talk about what we might anticipate is going to be the new normal when we all kind of get back to work. So thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, John.
So I thought I'd tell everybody a story about 4 people, everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. And the story about these 4 people named everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. There was an important job to do, and everybody was asked to do it. Everybody was sure somebody would do it. Anybody would have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody would do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. I actually saw this in the late 1980s. I was 2, but actually it's a story that I've shared many times, and it tends to happen to us. And as we get back to work, we need to think about how we get things done. And I think we need to be sure that we are able to act together as a team. Everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody ought to be able to work quickly to make decisions and get us back into the process of a new norm. Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, John. So that was a great way to set the stage for our time together. So what we're hoping to do is really just kind of get you thinking about what's the purpose of this team? Is it a short-term team to help you think through how you adjust to business, operations resuming? Is it something that maybe you identified during this time that's an opportunity for your organization and you need a team to come together to help brainstorm that? So we want to sort of talk a little bit about what would be the purpose of this team. We then want to think about what might be the skills, competencies, capabilities. So who might you need to consider on this team? And then get you started on the path to create this team, get them moving forward towards a path, and then ultimately building in opportunities to evaluate the team's performance and just kind of check in. So again, if left to our own devices, we may fall pitfall to John's story there and believe individuals are working on something that maybe they're not, or maybe we're not as intentional as we could be. So we want to make sure that we're evaluating the performance of that team as well. Oops, sorry, John.
That's okay. So, I think so many times we tend to act or react to when we have issues or problems. I've never liked the word problems, but in reality, many things we deal with are problems. And I find it very important, and we talk a lot at Strategy Solutions and in many organizations, to stop and analyze what the problem is. And so many times we jump to things trying to do good, and we don't really describe the problem. We should always quickly try to initiate interim actions. Work together, talk to the right people, find what are the possible causes, and then identify what's most likely and implement a solution and test it. You may solve things, you may lead yourself to a conclusion and a decision very quickly. And then again, you may, in many cases, need to move on and figure out what you're going to do. And I always like to talk about when we prioritize to look at frequency and impact, and then find out where the problem occurs. I would always use an analogy. I'm not much of a car person, but if you had a problem where you burned out an interior light every morning as you drove to work, the frequency of that would be almost constant. But if you lose a water pump, the frequency is going to be very low, but the impact is very high. It stops you from getting to work. It stops you from doing business. And that's kind of a broad explanation, but really think about frequency of problems and impact. And obviously, when you have high frequency, high impact issues, you need to really react quickly. Thanks.
Thanks. And I do just want to reiterate where John started. So this doesn't have to necessarily be a problem. This could just be coming up with a plan as you start to resume business operations, or it could be how are you going to open up your doors and still follow CDC guidelines. It could be how are you going to do some new service that you've identified your consumers and those who receive services from you actually need that maybe you're not offering. All these things are relevant, but again, just to reiterate John's point, it doesn't have to necessarily be a problem that you're creating your team for.
I really appreciate that, Jackie, because we come into the next slide, and that's a GNO analysis, and GNO is pretty simple, but G means as a group, as your team, are you able to solve issues? Do you need help as an N? You can solve the issues, but we need to find some assistance, maybe out of our workforce, maybe out of our board, maybe from a peer or a colleague. Get that and take advantage of it and still work to solve. If something comes up that's outside our authority, that's causing an issue for you, maybe it's a government regulation. Stop and make recommendations, or find an advocate. So many times I think people have a tendency to throw their hands up and say, well, I can't do anything about that. Well, leaders, great teams find ways to impact change even if it's outside of their realm of responsibility or their ability to act. So, keep that in mind when you look at a situation. If it's something you can handle as a group, solve it, move forward with it. If you need help, go get it. And if it's outside your ability to change, make a recommendation.
Thanks, John. And a team can include people both internal and external. So as you're thinking about who you might need, just like John said, if you need an expert, you need an advocate, that may not necessarily come within your organization. So look for those opportunities to be creative and, communicate with other organizations, collaborate, reach out to your local nonprofit or respective trade associations, and look for those synergies.
I love what Jackie just said, because, we all need to find ways to be connected. And those relationships and building relationships, maybe it's with your state representative, maybe it's with your congressman or their congressional aide. Build that relationship, build that trust, and it can make a world of difference to your organization and your cause going forward. We talk about basic beliefs. I always try to think this way, but the person that's doing the job usually knows the most about that job. Make sure you speak to them, make sure you talk to them, because for the most part, people want to be informed and involved in what's happening and what they're doing and what the organization's doing. And employees, all of us, deserve a voice in their own and our own destiny. It empowers teams to feel involved and engaged. I love the terms these days when we talk about employee engagement, instead of employee attitude surveys, we talk about engagement. We can do a lot by sticking to some simple basic beliefs. Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, John. So this next slide, we tend to do this when we're working with organizations to help identify the roles that individuals play on, say, a leadership or another team that was formed to come together. And it's a really easy exercise. We tend to do it experientially and let folks move around a room so you can visually see where people fit. But it's important to keep in mind that as you build teams, regardless of the number of individuals on a team, so even if a team is a team of one, you need to consider how these roles play out on that team. So we need people who are those big idea folks. So we've got to come up with the what could we do as an organization? What is the idea or the problem that we need to solve, right? So we've got the ideas. We also need those people who can then kind of cheerlead, champion, promote those ideas out in the community, out within the organization, and really kind of rally around them. You need those people who can kind of refine them and maybe challenge them. We tend to call these people like the devil advocates, right? So, well, what about this? Or what might it cost? How could we really do it? And then you need the people who ultimately can implement those ideas, right? So we've got to have the ideas. We've got to have somebody who helps to fine tune and get them to the point that they're actually realistic and something your organization could implement. And then you need the people who can do the work, the worker bees, and then those who can really champion and help get some forward momentum towards that idea. You also may have these people on your team who are flexors. So they really naturally kind of fit all of these buckets, and just by virtue of who they are, recognize a gap and step in to fill it. So the reason that we're bringing this up is as you think about a team, you want to take into consideration, do you have people that can actually do all of these roles on your team? And if you don't, you have to figure out how to get someone or get the individuals on the team to recognize that one of them is going to have to step up and actually fill this. In the absence of having all of these roles filled on your team, you may be in a position where you have a whole lot of ideas that you just can't quite seem to advance. Or you may have great ideas that you're just kind of gunshotting out there and they may not be well thought out. So it's important to be mindful of how these roles follow up and play into a team you may be part of. The other thing that we, go ahead, John.
Just add to that real quickly is that you really truly do need all of the quadrants filled with people. And if you don't have that, or if you don't have that flexor, and you are at a point or that you need to hire someone, think about that when you're making hiring decisions. It may really help you move your organization forward. Thanks.
Great point, John. Thank you. So I do just quickly want to mention our friend Stella here. And for those of you who showed up on Friday, we had a webinar all about building innovation into your organization. And again, as I noted, you'll definitely have access to that as well. But it comes into play when you think about teams, especially if you're trying to do something new or innovative. So this How Stella Saved the Farm is actually a short little allegory. It's a relatively easy read. It's written by 2 Dartmouth professors, and there is an accompanying kind of textbook that goes with it. But it's just a great way to think about innovation. And in this particular case, it's the difference between sheep and alpaca wool. So it's a fun little read. But the key takeaways that are worth noting when you think about a team here is, as you want to do something new, innovative in your organization, it's really, really difficult to get the people who are already busy doing the day-to-day operations of the organization to find time to do something new and innovative. Unfortunately, just human nature, at the end of the day, the urgent is always going to squeeze out the important. So managing and running what's already happening for your organization is always going to be the priority over trying to get something new up and off the ground. And unless folks are doing that in between the middle of the night, it's just really difficult to do. So what the professors who wrote How Stella Saved the Farm actually suggest is you build a dedicated team. So again, back to what might be a reason we have a team. So if the reason you're looking to build a team is to do something new and innovative, you want to figure out how to carve out this dedicated team. And ultimately, it consists of shared staff, right? So if you're thinking about developing a new program or service offering within your organization, you may need staff. So it's important that you've got some input from human resources on that. You likely are going to have to figure out how to get reimbursement, or at the very least, fund portions of this new program. So it's important that you have shared staff, maybe from the finance department, that are part of that as well. Ultimately, you're going to have to think about marketing and messaging. How do people even know we have this new great program and service? So those people have existing jobs that have some valid input into the planning of the new innovative idea. So you need their input, but you may not need them fully invested in the team. So you want to have a handful of folks who are this dedicated team, again, that are able to play those roles we talked about a few slides ago, and really come up with the idea, think through all of the hows and the contingencies, and build out that project plan to get it into fruition. But it's important that they have that tie back with the shared staff who can help inform them on the pieces that they may not have the expertise, but you already have people in the organization on. So if your new team is related to developing a new innovation, you really want to be mindful of who could you put on a dedicated team. Even if it's 1 or 2 individuals who you're able to carve out a handful of their existing workload to do. It may be brand new hires that you bring on board. But as you think about something new, you just want to be mindful that in the absence of having a dedicated team focused on the new, unfortunately, the urgent is always going to outweigh the important, and they're going to stay focused on doing the day-to-day operations of the organization.
I love it when Jackie talks about innovation. The American College of Healthcare Executives a few years ago was talking a lot about disruptive innovation and finding ways that may disrupt your organization, maybe cause a new normal, by disrupting, being innovative, and understanding it, and finding, your team to help you move forward and grow. I really like this. Leadership is plus a comprehensive approach equals successful change. Um, you know, I just read a new book, which is not something I'm doing all the time. I tend to go back to comments by Tom Peters and other words that were years ago. But I read a new book that was sent to me, and it's called The Chief Moment Officers. And it was written by Diane Serban Hopkins. And I'm just going to read to you a little comment that it says, senior leaders as servant leaders interested in the employees and the organization and are excited to get to know them and their perspectives better. Be sure that the staff will be delighted by the experience they have as you prepare to expand, approach, and delight your customers. I just thought it was such a great comment about leadership. And it's so important. I would always say and continue to say that leaders decide where the tracks should go, and managers lay the tracks, and our staff make sure the trains run on time. Get that comprehensive approach and you'll get successful change. Next slide, thanks. And understand something, you're going to find resistance to change. And that will be everywhere and in everything you do, that you'll find skeptics. People will feel a loss of authority or maybe a loss of status, especially if you bring in that new dynamic hire. Jackie talked about that person coming in. That could change the feeling of status or authority for many. And you might get those out there that are making deals that are going to say, hey, we really don't need to make this change. And those are just things we need to be aware of. I don't even like to talk about them because it feels negative to me. My wife tells me I only sleep to dream, and to think about where we're going. It's hard, but you have to be aware that you are going to have resistance to change in everything you do to one degree or another. Great teams get through that without a problem. Next slide.
Thanks, John. And these are also really important things to consider as you look to develop a new team or roll that concept out, is how might that team be perceived by others in the organization, which again, the way other people view or interact with the team could potentially impact this change. So what's it take to be an effective team, John?
So obviously you need to be flexible and help one another. It's been really nice for me as I'm new to Strategy Solutions, working with Jackie on preparing webinars to talk to you about, to watch how we work together and the other members of the team. And it truly feels like a team. It's a wonderful opportunity when we know what our objectives are. Sorry about that. Right, Jackie?
Absolutely.
It just gives us opportunities to, and what you're hearing in the background just tells us that sometimes change is rough. I hope you're all laughing about rough. It's so hard not seeing all of you. So we should find an opportunity to meet, share information, have effective team skills, make sure you interact with each other, listen intently, lean in, don't sit back, and be timely to respond and have the ability to help each other. Jackie is our Chief Operating Officer, and we have a Monday morning meeting, and I was thinking about this morning. One of the very first things she does is she starts our meeting with, does anybody need help from anybody else this week? And I think it's just a great way to feel part of the team, to feel like you're important, and it really leads us to be effective. So there, Jackie, I got a good plug-in for you too.
Thank you, John. Absolutely. That's the key success factor, is the ability to really work together, be mindful of our own weaknesses and growth opportunities, and look for our team to support us and build up and focus on each individual team member's strengths. So one of the things that we have found to be very successful within our own organization, and a principle that we definitely try to educate organizations that we work with, is this idea of completed staff work. So this is a really great way to show effectiveness among a team and even at the individual level. And really what that means is taking ownership for assignment. So when something's given, it's clear that this team owns that particular activity. And you want to make sure that that team is clarifying the expectations and the outcomes. So if we're developing something new and we're on the hook to, build a business case on this new program and service and report it back to our leadership, what are they looking for? What elements do they want included in that business plan? When do they want to have that business plan actually drafted? What's the timeline? So you want clarity around what is it that we're actually responsible to do here, so they're not kind of running off in left field and going down a different path that's not ultimately what is needed or wanted from the organization. It may be something, you may be given a task that's new, or something that you're not familiar with. A great way to do that is just, research some best practice and look for alternatives. In the age of technology, it's amazing how much you can find about what's available and what other people are doing just by a simple Google search. We've also found people are really receptive to just answering your questions. So if you call someone who's already implemented this program that you now want to try, or, as we start to roll out and things open up again, if you notice a similar organization, maybe that's in another state or another county that happens to open up before we do, pick up the phone and ask them, hey, we do similar services. How did this go for you? What were some of the unforeseen challenges that maybe you faced? How did you overcome them? People are really open to sharing their learned experiences so that you can help build upon and improve that. So call, do research. It's always great. And then the role of that team is really to make recommendations back. So based on, the instructions we were given as this team, based on what we found out by researching or talking to other organizations, here's what we really think is going to be in the best interest of our organization. Here's how we think we might roll it out. Here are some of the potential concerns we anticipate we might face. Here's how we think we could work around those. And then ultimately, you just want to manage expectations throughout the process. So if you can look at the role of a team back to the individual, or maybe it's a team too, that's giving them the assignment, the best thing they can do is develop that back and forth, open door relationship and communication, to be able to go back and say, hey, we're struggling here. Help me again understand what it is that you're looking for. Or we've tried and we're not getting anywhere. Help us understand another alternative. Or maybe even, hey, here's what we're thinking. Does this make sense? Does this align with what your expected outcomes are for us? So the more you can have kind of that back and forth, we actually call it noodling and like throwing spaghetti at the wall. So take an idea, toss it, see what sticks. So the more you can do as a team to collaborate, brainstorm, kind of spitball things back and forth to one another, the more successful your end product is ultimately going to be.
And it's interesting.
And so,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
It's just interesting because what you heard through Jackie talking about that really means you almost inherently do the GNO process with each other and others. That back and forth is, do I need help? Do I talk about it? It's outside what I can do. There's got to be somebody that can make a recommendation to me. This whole idea of management and involving employees and continual improvement isn't that different after all. than many things we do. We talk about, let's make sure we know some of the objectives. And objectives, we hear so much about them sometimes. And just make sure they're realistic. And you can read down through that slide and you'll see it. But I don't want an objective that isn't possible to do. And I also want to be able to measure it so that I can understand if we're doing well, if the team's doing well. Is it specific? Put times on it. So many people tend to go away from that, but you've got to keep moving forward. And if you've heard some of my other seminars, webinars, you'll hear about communications. It's so important that you're doing that back and forth. And it really does lead us to continual improvement. Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, John. So with that, I will remind everyone that if you've got a specific question, please feel free to use the question and answer or the chat feature. And I do want to be mindful of your time. So we'll sort of stick around and let questions come up as they may. But if there's something specific or you'd like any additional support or information, John and my contact information is on this slide. And again, you'll receive the slides. And I did want to just remind everybody that right now Strategy Solutions is making free 30-minute consultative discussions available to anyone around almost any topic. So if you are struggling with what might a team look like, or maybe you have a team and you're trying to figure out how to help them align to perform more efficiently or effectively. If you want to think through, how do you raise money given this current COVID situation? How do you adjust a strategic plan? All of those topics, we've got experts on our team that would be happy to set up a time to talk with you. So if there's anything you'd like some one-on-one time, please shoot me an email and I'll get you set up for a 30-minute slot that works for you, that one of our team members can help you kind of talk through and think through something that comes up. And again, I did just want to note that you will get the recording from today and the slides, as well as the others in this series. And then that link should also take you to the website where you can find the initial webinar series that we did as well. So with that, John, any closing remarks?
Just, we wish all of you well, and as we hopefully get back to our new normal soon, and begin to find ways to grow and support our communities and our nation again is very important. I wish you all well and I hope you're all staying safe and healthy.
Thanks, John, and thank you all so much for your time today. Again, John and I will stick around for a few minutes. If anybody has any questions or comments, please use the question and answer and chat feature, and John and I will be happy to answer them. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your day and have a great week. Stay safe.